In this section, we're going to be showing you how you can store multiple values within one variable, and then also how to return those values and utilize those values within your JavaScript code. And this is where arrays come in. Arrays are a great place to store multiple values within one variable, and you're going to really see the power that's available within arrays, as well as objects. So objects are very similar to arrays because they allow you to hold multiple values within that one variable and then call to those values as needed within your code. And there's a lot of benefits to adding your values into an array or into an object, because this is grouping it all together and giving you that access from one call. You can also explore different arrays and how to store values in multiple different formats. So you can store them as strings, variables, booleans, and you can also store objects in arrays and arrays within objects. So this makes it really powerful, and you can really expand on that. And we're going to create our first application. So this is a mini application. It's going to be a to-do list. It's going to be built from scratch, and it's going to allow you to see the interaction that's available within an array and how arrays can store task information, and then also how we can output that information. So once we put it into an array, how we can get it out of that array and make use of it within our code. We're also going to look at different ways how arrays can hold default values, and how you can get that information, default values that are contained within an array. So each array, you can actually get its length back, so you can just simply call to the array name and a length, and it will tell you how many items are contained within there. So this is the beginning of where arrays become really useful and powerful, because not only can you get the length, but there's a lot of built-in methods to use arrays. So you get a lot of power with putting your data within an array. We're also going to be building out a guessing game where you have to guess a value that is contained within the array. So you have to guess that index value of an item within the array. We're going to be building this out from scratch with the content we're learning within this section and some of the content from the previous section. We're also going to introduce you to how to randomize a value. So that's math. It's a built-in method in JavaScript, and it's really useful to create random information. And a lot of times it's used within games. So we're adding it in within this section to make things more interesting as we go along and create exercises. And it's all about practice. So make sure that you take the opportunity to practice working with arrays within this section so you can get really familiar with them. You can see how you can manipulate and update the contents of those arrays, and also see how arrays work and how they're ready and all the different functionality that you have in order to interact with your content that's contained within those arrays. So you can access that information, check if the values are actually contained within the array, and that's another really useful part of array, because you can check to see if an item or if a value is already sitting in the array. And this is where we're also going to create another exercise, and this is going to be the array updater. So the user input is going to be used in order to find values contained within the array, and we're going to create a dynamic array. So we're going to be updating that array dynamically, looking at user input from the prompt, which we learned in one of the earlier lessons. And then we're going to look at nested arrays and multi-dimensional arrays, where you can store even more information and retrieve that information and make arrays even more valuable. So getting started with JavaScript arrays, and also how you can loop through that data that's contained within an array, so you can iterate through that array, returning back all of that values and data that's contained within there. And then also introducing you to JavaScript objects, how we can store lots of information in that one variable, and then get data from JavaScript objects and make use of it within your JavaScript code. JavaScript objects can be used to manipulate data and retrieve new values and a whole lot more. So you're going to learn how to retrieve JavaScript objects, make use of JavaScript objects, and also loop through the contents and retrieve information contained within those objects. So you're going to see how JavaScript objects and JavaScript arrays can be combined together to provide you even more power with that data. So when you're ready, let's begin creating and working with JavaScript and arrays and. Welcome back. Earlier we saw how useful variables could be, where we could store values and then recall them later on within our script. So in this lesson, we're going to look at arrays. Arrays actually give us the ability to hold multiple values in one single variable. So first of all, let's set up a variable, and I'm going to call it my array. And initially it looks similar to what we were doing originally when we were setting up variables, but arrays have one unique difference, and that's the ability to hold multiple values within this one contained variable. Arrays can hold any data type, and to create an array, so this is a literal array, and this is the simplest and fastest way to create arrays. So the way that we create that is we create a value just like we were with other variables, and then here we use these square brackets, and then the content inside of these square brackets, this is where we hold all of the items that are contained within the array. So they can be strings, much as what we saw earlier with the data types. They can also be numbers, and they can also be Boolean values. So basically, we've created an array, and this array is going to have 3 values inside of it. And this is the most common way to create arrays. And again, this is called a literal array. There's also in JavaScript another way to create arrays, and that's using the array constructor. So this is a little bit different, and it's not as common. So the format for this one is that we do the same thing where we set up a variable. And let's do this one, my array 1. And this time we're going to set this up as a new array. So this keyword new is really important, because we need to specify that this is a new object that we're creating, and the object that we're creating is going to be an array. And then within the array values, so notice that it's the rounded brackets, and you can then have the same contents as we did with the literal array. So again, this one is not used as often. You can also define arrays with no values. So if you don't have any default values, you can add in values later on as well. So we could do this where we do the my array, and we can just specify that this is a new array, and then leave the content within the brackets blank. And the same thing for the literal array. We can do the same thing where we can initiate an array, and I'm going to give it array 3, and we can simply have a blank value there. So this also indicates that this now is going to be an array, because remember, with the variables, we look at the value which is held on the right hand side to determine the different types of values that are being contained within there, and the different types of variables that we're defining and setting up. So these are the 2 ways that we can set up arrays, and this one up here, the literal array, is the one that's most commonly used. And now that we see we've got a lot of different values that we can store in here, and we can literally store pretty much as many values as we want to within an array. There is a limit, but it's a really large number. It's something in the billions, so we don't have to worry about ever running out of space within the array. So the next thing that we need to do is have a way to recall this information. So if I was to do something like console log, and we'll take a look at what we can log out within when we console log out the variable myArray. Let's go out to our browser. We'll refresh the page, and I'm going to make the console side a little bit bigger there. So we see that we get all 3 values are contained when we call back the myArray variable name. And we see that we've got the contents in there. We've got the string, which is the first value, the 100, which is the next value, and then we've got false, which is the last value. And we also see here on the left-hand side, there's numbers. So starting at 0, and this is an important thing to note, that arrays do start at 0. And they're known as what is called 0 indexed. So basically what that means is that array with an index of 2 is actually going to be the third item in the array because we've got 3 there. And we also see that we've got a length of 3 for the array, and we are going to be looking at that property later on as well within the upcoming lessons. So now in order to recall some of the content that's contained within the array, all we need to do is reference the index value. So if we wanted to recall the first item in the array, what do you think that we do? How do you think that we could recall that, specifying the myArray value? And I'll give you a hint that we use the square brackets, and within here is where we place the index value of the item that we want to recall. So to recall back string, we would do myArray, do the square brackets and 0. So now when I go back out and if I refresh it, we see that we've got a value of string in there. And we could do the same thing for the other items in the array. So we could return back the third item in the array, which is has an index of 2. We can also return back the second item, which has an index of 1. So in order to return any value, we use the indice, and this returns back the corresponding item within the array. So we have our way of retrieving information from the array, and now I want to show you one way to update the information within the array. So if we do know the indice number that corresponds to the item that we want to update, we can specify that within our code where we can myArray and give it index number. And then now all we need to do, just like we do with any other variable, we can assign any value we want into that array. And now when we list out the entire array within our JavaScript, we'll see that we've updated the value successfully. So let's go back out here and we'll refresh it. So we see that now we've got string, new value, and false. One other thing to note is that we are able to change different data types. So just like with variables, the items within the array, they can take on any data type, whatever is specified when we're assigning those values to that particular item. So and arrays are a great way to store a bunch of information, grouping it together, and then having access to it. So what I want you to do is to create your own array. Open up your editor, go into the editor and define a new array and create a list of items that you like to do. So different tasks that you're looking to do, and that's going to be the first step in what we're going to be looking at in the next lesson, where we're going to do an actual exercise with that task list. So go ahead, create your task list and output that task list using console log within your browser console, and take a closer look at how that content gets output. And in the next lesson, we're going to be showing you how to do even more with that content that's contained within the array. So that's coming up. Welcome back, and in this lesson, we're going to do an exercise where we're going to create an interactive task list. So this one, I want you to follow along as well within this lesson. So go ahead and open up your editor and let's start writing some JavaScript code. So the first thing that we want to do is set up our task array. So let's start out by creating a variable. So we're going to create an array and we're going to list out a bunch of our favorite tasks within this array. So go ahead and set up that array, pause the video, and go ahead and add in some tasks within that task array. So just anything that you would be typically doing during the day. And next, we're going to look at the progress of those tasks. So go ahead, set up that task array, and then come back, and we're going to continue building out this exercise. So I hope you had the opportunity to set up the task. And now let's add in some tasks. So one of the tasks might be take out some garbage. Another task in the array, maybe we might want to read a book. So I'll add that in as a task. And another one might be write JavaScript. So that will be another task that we want to do within a day. And then maybe also go to work or something like that, so that we have a wide variety of different tasks that we can work on throughout the day. So next, we need to specify our progress on these tasks. So let's set up another array, and we're going to have some progress that we want to specify within this task. So let's go ahead and add in this one, another array, and this one we're going to call it progress. And then within here, let's add in some progress words. So we've got one, done, and next one in progress, and not started. Or we could maybe just call it to do, because this is a to-do list, so let's just call it to do. So that's good enough. So now we've got 3 options here that we can be doing for any one of the tasks that we have listed above. So next, what I want to do is I want to ask and specify. We want to specify within a prompt and ask the user a question. So we've got our variable. So this is going to be a response back from the prompt. So this is the same thing that we were doing earlier, where we're creating that interaction with the user. So we've got our prompt popping up there, and now we need to format a question. So let's ask them which task, and we're going to just do 1 to 3. Asking them which task, or actually it should be 1 to 4. Asking them which task they want to mark their progress on, or specify where they are with the task. And then the second question, so question number 2, so we just call this one question 1, and this one can be question 2, and the prompt is going to ask status. And also maybe what I want to do is I want to copy this down here, so I can do something like 1, 2 is in progress, and 3 is equal to do. And I'll just update these to equal signs. So I want you to pause the video here, open up your editor, and add in another variable for another array for the progress. You can just copy the same values that I have here. So basically, maybe even you might want to only stick to 2. It also depends on how much, how in-depth you want your task list to be. And then next, set up the questions. First one asking which task we want to tackle. And then next, what is asking what the status is that we want to specify for that particular task. So go ahead, pause the video, and in the next lesson, I'm going to show you how we can pull this all together and make use of it and output some results within our console. So welcome back, and I hope you had an opportunity to add this into your editor and try it out. Go ahead and save it, refresh the page. So we see that we're getting asked for the questions. And so everything is working properly. And let's also output task there. So we've got all of our array values that are contained within that task. And I believe that you might have different ones than me, depending on what you thought was needed to get done during the day. And then next we've got progress as well. So it's always a good idea to go into your console just to make sure that those values are there and that there's nothing wrong with your script, that everything is functioning properly and everything looks to be proper. And so now we're able to actually create a result. So we've asked the 2 questions. First one is going to ask which task we want to tackle. The second one is asking what status we want to enter in, how far of the progress we want to specify for that task. And so lastly, let's just add this into the console, because we've got the console opened up here, and we'll console log out the results. So let's say that for today, you will, and let's add in the string value. So remember, we have to recall the value of the task, and we've asked that number here within the question. So let's go ahead and put that within the brackets. So this is the same thing. First, I'll show you if we're just going to use some defaults of 1, and then I'll bring in the values of the questions. So next, you have and status, or we just put status of task, and we'll put an equal sign there. And then next, we need to concatenate in some additional information into this returned result. So we're going to output progress, and we're going to use the default of 1 as well. So this is just a default console message, and go ahead, try this out. We're going to refresh it. So which tasks do we want to tackle? And we haven't linked in the questions yet, so it actually doesn't matter. Today you will read a book. Status of the task is in progress. So next thing that I want you to do is to pause the video and create a dynamic response from the prompts into the console. So dynamically allow the user to pick one of the tasks, and then also pick the status of the task and see the result within the console. And one thing to note, that the arrays do start with 0. So this one is 0, that one is 1, that's 2, and that's 3. So there's a bit of a challenge in there that you got to make sure that the user is only picking 1 to 4 because there's 4 items in here, but we want to make sure that the user can actually select the correct one, the correct corresponding task. So take a look at the code, pause the video, and I'm going to show you the solution coming up. So I hope you had an opportunity to try that out, and we know that our prompts are returning values here. So we can put the value of question 1 and question 2 in there. And one thing to note, that these values are not going to correspond with the items there. We do need to be more specific that we want to actually return a task value. So let's update the returned value of the prompt, and we're going to do question, and we're going to subtract 1 from the value of question. And the same thing we need to do as well for the question 2. We need to subtract a value of 1 from that question. So try that out. Open up your browser, refresh the page, and let's see if this works. So which task, and we've got our tasks, so 1, 2, 3, 4, not to get confused with the index values within the array. So let's take the first task, which is take out the garbage, and then the second one for progress, let's say that this one is to do, so we're going to give it a 3. So today you will take out garbage, status of task is to do. So everything is working properly, and this was important to note that we always need to start at 0 with the index values, and when we're recalling the array items, we need to use the index value. So that's where we've got that -1 that we needed to add in there, just to be sure that, just to be correct in selecting that correct index value. So in the next lesson, we're going to look at some array properties and to make this even more dynamic. So that's coming up in the next lesson. Welcome back, and in this lesson, we're going to look at some array properties. So earlier we saw that we can list out an array here within our console, and we've got all of the items listed with their index values, and then we've got this property here at the end called length. So if we actually specify length, we get the value of 4. So we can actually pull back this information of length and use it within our code. So notice as well that within the prompt, I have a length of 1 to 4. So I can do this a little bit smarter as well, where I can make it dynamic, and I can use the value of task length directly within that prompt. So now if I go back out here and if I refresh it, it still says 4, but if I go ahead and if I update that array, so if I go ahead and if I add in another item in the array sleep, and I go back out here and if I refresh it, that value actually dynamically updated, because this isn't a static value, it's a dynamic value. And this is one of the things when you are programming, you try to make your applications as dynamic as possible. So basically that means that we're not setting static values, and as we change, we're expecting our values, our length of our arrays to change. We're expecting new items to be added in, and we're also expecting maybe the task lists are going to be in different. You might have more tasks, you might have less tasks, and so depending on the person, we need to have this ability to pick up that dynamic value. So this always reflects the number of elements in the array, and basically it's the length of the array minus 1. So it returns all the number of elements in the array, and in order to get the last item in the array, then we need to minus 1 off of the length. And that's how we can always automatically pick up the last item in the array. So for this instance, I'm going to just comment out some of this code that we've written here. And I'm going to update this to say that we're going to show the last item within that array. So what I want you to do now is to pause the video, open up your console or open up your editor, and I want you to select the last item in this array using the array length property. So try it out and just print that out into your console and see if you can get that to produce the value of sleep within the console without actually writing sleep in the console. So pause the video, try it out, and I'm going to show you the solution coming up. So I hope you had the opportunity to try that out. So I'm going to refresh this page, and I do need to save this first, and we'll just refresh it now so we don't have those prompts coming up anymore. And what we want to do is in the console, we want to display sleep without actually writing sleep, and we don't actually know how many items are in this array. So obviously we could count them, but let's make this dynamic. So first of all, let's use console log, because we know we need to output that information in the console. So that's the first step. The next step is to select the task array. So we know we need to output a value from the task array, and now we need to determine what the index value is of the last item. And we know that we have a value that we saw earlier where we can do task length, but we know that this length is going to be the actual count of the items in the array, and it's going to be 1 higher than the last item. So we know that if we subtract 1, then technically we should have the last item from the array. So let's try this out, go back out, refresh it, and indeed we do get sleep. So this gives us the ability to select the last item if we want to select the second last item, and this can get a little bit risky because if we only have 1 item in there, then it's not going to work. But because we've got more than this amount of items in the array, we can still get that second last item got to work. It should be go to work, so let me update that. So this is the way that we can use length and dynamically pull back values. So there's another thing within our arrays that I want to mention. So we saw earlier how we can update items within the array, and all we need to do is specify the index value. And we saw that we could do something like task, and we can specify if we wanted to update index number 3, we could do something like this, and we could equal it to new value, and this would update that third index item within the array. So that would be the got to work or go to work, and we see that, let me pull that back there, and we see that now we're able to update that new value. So one of the other things that we can do for arrays is we can specify that the index, so we can pick a really high index. We can do something like 100. So what do you think is going to happen here? And I'm just going to set that to be -1 so that you can see how this dynamic equation calculates out to still get that last value. So now let's try this out. So what do you think is going to happen here? Do you think that it's going to add in a bunch of blank items into the array going all the way up to 100? Because we know that this is 0, this one is 1, that's 2, that's 3, and this is 4. But what are we going to do with 100? So let me show you. And also I want to console log out all of that entire array so that this will give you a better illustration of actually what's happening behind the scenes. So let's log that out, go back out here, refresh the page, and we see that now we actually have a length of 101 because we've actually added in 95 undefined values that are available within the array. So if we were to actually pull back task and we wanted to see task 44, it's undefined. We can go in there and we can define task 44 and we can equal it to new or whatever we want to call it. And now if I list out that array again, I've got 39 undefined before, I've got that the value of new, and then I've got another 55 undefined, and then I've got that new value at the end. So this is an important thing to note, that when you do dynamically assign an index value and you're just picking it out of not relevant to how many items are already in the particular array, then you're going to end up with this where you've got a bunch of undefined, essentially placeholders that get added into the array. And these are all items, so the length of the array reflects the last index value that we've set within the array. So now I want you to pause the video, and I've got another task for you. And in this one, what I want you to do is to add a new item just beside sleep here. So we're going to add a new item within our task array and place it beside sleep. So not overwriting any of the ones in there, and do it dynamically again using the task length, because we don't want to, in case our array changes, we got new items coming in there. We can't be sure which the last index value is going to be, so let's just add it at the end of task. So pause the video, and I want you to write that out and set a value here that says watch TV. And I'm going to show you the solution coming up. So I hope you had the opportunity to try this out within the editor, and let me show you what the solution is. And the solution to this is actually going to be really simple and straightforward. I can simply do task length, because we know that the task length is going to be all the items in there. So basically this is going to be the next available item within the array, and we did say that we want to change this to watch TV. So let's see how this turns out. So let's go and refresh it, and indeed we were able to add in a fifth item in there just by using the task length. And I'll just show you how this works as well. So if I wanted to add in even more items, I can do task length again, and I can equal a next item or something like that. And then if I list out that array, we can see that we're able to add in another item at the end of the array. Now there is a better way to work with your arrays. Arrays have built-in methods, and I'm going to be showing you how to use those in the upcoming lessons. This lesson, we're going to be going over more details about arrays. So previously we saw that there was a number of data types that are in JavaScript, and notice that array actually isn't a data type. So if we do our type of method and we specify task, which is our array from our code, and we see that we get returned back that it's actually an object. So it's not actually an array type, it's an object, but it's a special type of object, and we're going to be looking at objects in more detail in the upcoming lessons as well. There's another built-in method that I want to take a quick look at, and this one is called arrayIsArray, and this actually lets us check to see if a value of an array is an actual array. So all we need to do is specify our array between the rounded brackets, so passing it as a value within this method, and we can see that it gets returned back that this is true. So this is an actual array. If we take an item from that array, we can get returned back, and we see that this is actually false because that item within that array is not an array of itself. And we can also, when it comes to arrays, we can actually put arrays within themselves as well. And I'm going to be showing you that as well coming up in the upcoming lessons. So next, let's go back to type of and task. And we'll specify that we can actually see the different items in the array, and we can see all of their data types. So we can specify that when we select type of, so we see that all of those items are treated as separate values, and they've got their own properties associated with them. So we know that this one is a string, and obviously this is a string because we've got the quotes around it, and we can have multiple different data types contained within the array. So the array is just a collection of items that we can use to store multiple values within one variable. The next lesson has another exercise coming up. Welcome back. In this exercise, we're going to be building out a quick prompt asking users what the array index value is of a particular item that is going to be randomly selected and shown within the prompt. So I need to introduce you to math, and math is another built-in object that is contained within JavaScript. So it's all ready to go, and there's nothing else additional that you need to do for math. So let's open up our console, and I'll show you a little bit more about math. And math has a few built-in methods that we can do. So we can do one called random, and we can see that every time we do math random, we get this random number. It starts out with 0, it's a decimal number, and it's got a whole bunch of numbers after that. So basically, it gives us the ability to generate a random value, and at this point, it's not really that useful because all of them are decimal something or other. So we need to actually do something with this random math value, and the way that we can do this, we can multiply it by a number. So if we do something like multiplied by 10, we can see that we get a random value which is going to come in from anywhere from 0 to 9.99999, so anywhere within that number. So we see that we can use math in order to generate this random number, but we still have all of this decimal place, the rest of those characters. So within math, we also have the ability to round it. We can round it to the floor, we can round it to the ceiling, and we are going to look more at math in the upcoming latter lessons. But for now, what I needed to do is I just want to demonstrate how we can get a random number depending on how many items we have in the array. So we can use math floor, and then we can use that math random that we were looking at earlier. And we can multiply this by 10, and we see that when we use math floor, it actually rounds down that number. So this previously would have been 8 point something or other, and what we're doing with the math floor, we're getting rid of all of that decimal, all those decimal numbers. So one other last thing that we do want to take care of is that we want to add 1 to this equation, because we want to start it out with 1 to 10 instead of 0 to 9. So it just makes more sense. And this is how we can get a random number from 1 to 10. So now that we saw how math works, and math is really super useful whenever you're creating some applications and you want to have this randomizer effect. So this is very useful for games. So let's jump back into our editor, and we're going to create an array with a bunch of animals in it. And then we're going to ask the user to guess which index value this animal is appearing at. And of course, because we're actually the ones that are writing up the array, we're already going to know that. We're going to be able to see that. And this is where having that random value is going to be really interesting, because it's going to make this interaction for the user a lot more interesting, so that we don't always have that same static question. So it could be something like, maybe we're even ranking our favorite animals, and we're starting out with our most favorite, which is a cat, then a dog, then a rabbit, and then a bird. And then maybe lastly, we could even do a fish. So we've got our array of animals, and next we need to select one of those randomly. So what I want you to do is to pause the video, think back to the previous lesson where we know that animals has a length to it, and see if you can get a random number generated from using the math value, if you can get a random index value for this particular array. And I'm going to show you how to do that coming up. So pause the video, give it a shot, and I'll show you the solution coming up. Welcome back, and I hope you had the opportunity to try this out for yourself. And let's just go back out here, we'll refresh the page, and we know that we've got our animals array, and every array has a length. We know that there's 5 items within that array. So we can actually use this to generate a random number. So let's just do random index. And this is where we're going to use math. So this is that built-in object that has a bunch of properties and methods attached to it. And we are going to look closer at that later on in the upcoming lessons as we progress through this course. But for now, it's just important to see that we do have ability to generate some random numbers, and that basically makes our JavaScript a little bit more interesting. So what we want to do here is we want to multiply it by animal's length. So this is actually going to give us a random index value, and then let's just console log that out for now. And in the next part, we're going to make use of that within our prompt. So we see that we've got a random index, and now let's refresh it, and we see that we've got 0, we're gone all the way up to 4, so I'm just refreshing it a bunch of times. So everything looks to be working, and now we can actually select out a random item from our array. So what I want you to do now, again, is to pause the video and set this up so we're console logging out a random item from this array. So we've got the 5 items in that array. We're able to pick a random one using math. So try it out, and I'm going to show you the solution. So pause the video. And I hope you had the opportunity to try this out for yourself. And the solution is to use the random index variable as our index value that we want to find. So now when we go back out and we refresh it, we get a random collection of values coming out of the array. So now the next step is to simply put that value out into the prompt. So let's create our prompt. So this is our message to the user, and here we want it to prompt out to them. So we're going to prompt, and the question is which index value is, and maybe what we can do here, instead of console logging it out, we'll just call it random animal. And this makes it a little bit easier when we're using variables to place that into here, and it also makes it more reusable. So we can pick up this random value and use it anywhere within our code. So which index value is the random animal? And next, what we need to do is we need to check to see if the user's value is correct. So let's take a look at this as well. And here we're going to use that ternary operator that we looked at earlier, which actually is going to give us the ability to compare what the result is and provide either wrong or correct response. So this will be response. And this one, we're going to take a look at the response back here, so the message. So this should be a numeric value for the index value. And next, we need to compare it to the random index value. So we need to see if it's equal to this random index value. And you can bracket around that so it's more readable. So just do those rounded brackets. And next, we're going to provide the solution. So if that condition is true, then we're going to output correct. Otherwise, we're going to output wrong. And we can also even add to it wrong. It was, and put a space there and concatenate that together. And then maybe we can even supply that answer so that this would be the correct response that we were expecting from the user. And lastly, let's alert that out. So we're just going to alert out the response. And let's try this out. So now we're ready to try out to ask the user which index value is this random animal, and we can see if the user gets the correct response. So go out, refresh your browser. Which index value is rabbit? So we see that it's 0, 1, 2. So the correct answer should be 2, but let's put 3. And we see wrong, it was 2. So let's try this again. Which index value is rabbit? So we already got that one. So let's try it again. And for some reason, it just seems like we keep getting rabbit. So let's try this again. Which index value was fish? So that was just some random chance that we kept getting rabbit 3 times in a row. So now we've got which index value is fish. So we need to specify which item it is in the index. So let's give it a value of 4. And we see that we're correct. So you can have some fun with this. And you can see how much more interesting random makes things, as we don't know which item from the array is going to be popping up. And we were able to use it in a combination with the prompt and the ternary operator in order to return back a response, checking to see if the user answered correctly or not. So in the next lesson, we're going to be looking at how we can modify our arrays. So right now we've been working with a fairly static array. We've done some modifications within the console, but I'm going to show you how to do that within the code as well. So that's coming up. Welcome back, and in this lesson I'm going to show you why JavaScript is truly amazing. Because with arrays, we also have the ability, which is built in, to modify these arrays. So I've kept my animals array because I just love having an array full of a bunch of animals that we can utilize and make use of within this lesson. So now that I've got my array, I've got my 5 items in my array, I can add new information into this array by doing a push. So this is, in order to push, so we specify animals, and then we use the method push. So we specify the array name, and then we use the method push. This is built-in method within JavaScript. So we want to add another item into this array. So let's add in sheep. And then next, let's console log out the animals array, and we'll take a look at and see what actually happened to our array. So refresh, and we see that sheep got added in there at the end. So push gives you the ability to add item at the end of an array. So next, we can also remove that item from the end of the array. So this is another built-in method in JavaScript, and we need to specify the array. So we've got animals is the array that we wanted to use, and this time what we want it to do is we want to use pop. and we don't have to pass a value in there. And basically what pop will do will remove last item from the end of an array. So let's go out here and refresh it, and we see that array is back to what originally was. We also have some additional methods that are really cool and provide us quite a bit of stuff that we can do within our arrays. And this is why developers love using arrays in JavaScript. And it gives you so much more power than just having it directly as a variable. So we can have these collections of items. So if we wanted to remove the item in the first item, so let's say we want to take cat out of our array, we can use the shift method. So this will remove first item, and I'm not going to keep saying in the array. So let's refresh it, and now we see that cat is gone. We can also add an item back in there. So instead of shift, it's going to be unshift. And this one, much like whenever we're adding anything, we need to specify what we want to add in. So let's add in another animal here. So instead of our cat, we've taken the cat out, we've added in a horse. Let's go out and refresh it, and we can see that this way we can add items in the first, add first item to array. So that gives us the ability to add that first item into the array. We can also splice, so we can remove items depending on what their index value is. And much like what we did with the prompt method, we can also assign variables to this. So basically what happens is that, so similar to if I wanted to remove another item from animals, so I'll just do that within the console. And I'll show you what our response is. So we'll just pop, and this is removing the last item. And we see that when we remove that last item, our response is the value of the last item. So we can set a variable, and we can have it remove 1. And then over here, we can console log, and we can actually log what was removed, because we're able to pick that information up just as we did with the prompt. So we see that sheep was actually removed. So every time we remove something, we can actually place that within a variable, or we could even place it in an array if we want to do that as well. So another thing that we want to do is we have the ability to actually splice. So we can specify a position and how many items we want to remove. So animals, and let's use splice this time. So this one is a little bit tricky because it's actually going to take 2 arguments in there. So the first one is the position of the item, so the index value. So let's take rabbit out here. Let's take rabbit and bird. So we know that 0, 1, 2. So let's start at 2, and we'll remove out 2 items. And we see that now we've taken out rabbit and bird. And now if I list out animals, that one's gone. So we've essentially, if we had set a variable, we would have actually created an array with the items that we were removing using splice. So splice is really useful as well because it gives us this ability to pull back more than one item out of the array and be really specific with what we want to select and what we want to remove. So animals splice, first argument is the index position, the position of the item that we want to remove. So we went with 2, and in this instance, let's just remove 1 item. So we're going to essentially be removing rabbit out of the array and remove from position number of items. So just put that, go out here and refresh it, and we can see that we took rabbit out of our array. So a couple other methods that I did want to mention. So we also have the ability to take animals and we can reverse them. So by using the reverse method, and basically this reverses the order. reverses the order of items. So now let's take a closer look, and we can see that fish is first, bird, and it's reversed the items. And we can also do animals sort. So this is another useful method. And basically this gives us the ability to sort items by value. So basically it will alphabetically sort all of the items within the array. So we've got bird, dog, fish, horse, and if we had some numbers in there, they actually go before the characters, so numbers would come in first. So what I want you to do now is I've got a challenge for you, and what I want you to do is to take an array, and I want you to sort it, but in reverse alphabetical order. So whatever, and I'm going to add in zebra into this as well, so that we have something starting with Z. So basically, the way that I want it sorted is zebra, rabbit, fish, dog, cat, bird. So let's pause the video here and see if you can sort this array in a reverse sort order. So I hope you had the opportunity to try this out, and really this is going to be something that we've already done down here where we're taking this animals array. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring this one back down here, and I'm going to comment out all of this content here so that's not interfering with what we're looking at now for this particular challenge. So the challenge was to take that array, to sort it in reverse order, and really it's as simple as just making those commands in the right order. So first we sort, then we reverse, and that should give us the value in reverse. So let's see. So we get zebra, rabbit, fish, dog, cat, bird. So that was relatively easy. And there's another trick that I wanted to show you as well. So what I'll do is I'll just comment these ones out, and you can actually take this and you can chain these methods together. So if we want to sort, first we want to sort, then we want it to reverse. And if I go back out here and refresh it, we see that we get that same effect. So you can actually chain them together. You don't necessarily need to have them on separate lines or separate statements. You can bring them together and make it a lot more neater when you're outputting your code. So another one that I want to show you before we finish off this lesson, and that's going to be fill. So fill is a really powerful one, and we saw earlier that if I take my array, and so I'm going to comment that one out as well, and we saw earlier that if we take the array and if I do animals and if I do something like 20, and then I add in another animal here, so I'm going to go back to horse because I think I'm running out of animals here. So if I go back to here and if we print out the array, we've got 21 items in there, and we've got a bunch of undefineds there. So we've got a bunch of undefined values that are sitting there within that array. So this is where fill can be used, and we can actually fill in the missing items in the array. So now that we've set the length to 21, I can take animals and I can use fill. And fill is pretty powerful because it gives you the ability to fill all of those empty items. So I know that I've got a couple options here, parameters that I can enter in. So the first thing that we need to enter in is the value. So if we've got a mouse, and next we can enter in a starting position, so starting index. So we've got 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's start it at position number 6, and then we can leave it at 6, and I'll show you what actually happens now. So we see that instead of leaving them all blank, it fills in all of those values with mouse all the way till the end. I can also specify an ending index value. So I have another option here, and I can do something like 20 and refresh it, and we see that it goes all the way to item number 20, and then it stops there. So it fills all of those in with mouse, but it stops before it hits that last one, which is the horse. So I could also do something like animals length, and we could refresh it, and we can see that this time, because the length is 21, it's going to go all the way to 21. So I could also subtract 1 off of the length to make it a little bit more dynamic. Refresh it again, and we can see that way we made it more dynamic. So I do have another really quick challenge for you, and this is going to be try to make this value of 6 dynamic. And pause the video, and I'll show you how to set that value. And let me show you what the solution is. So the solution is to set a start value, and here is where we can use this value of animals length -1, and this gives us a value of, so we can console log that out so we can actually see what that start value is. And then let's replace 6 with that start value. Go back out, refresh the page. So we've got our start value of 5. So we know that we don't need to subtract the 1 off of our start value. So we'll just leave it at animals length, refresh it. And this time we got 6, so we're correct. We're able to start at zebra, and we're able to add filler all the way to the horse. So in the next lesson, we're going to be working with all of these different built-in methods, and I'm going to be issuing you a challenge to take a starting array value and provide the array value that I'm going to be showing you. So that's coming up in the next lesson.